Up next, I have the pleasure of introducing Sophie Egan, who's the director of the Stanford Food Institute and Sustainable Food Systems. She's the co-director of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative and the director of Food for Climate League. Sophie is an internationally recognized leader at the intersection of food, health, and climate. She's a former CIA program director like myself, and she's also a dear friend, so much so that we very much match today. So I have the pleasure of working closely with Sophie as the other co-director of MCURC. I'm so proud of the work of the member institutions who show up to do research year over year to build evidence for our industry. And today, Sophie's going to be talking about the Collective Impact Project, which I hope that you will find really inspiring as a strategy that's really rooted in the Menus of Change principles. So join me in welcoming Sophie to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? Yeah? No. There. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Abby. So I'm excited to share with you a little bit of a case study in a strategy that is really a long-term strategy from the Stanford Food Institute called Collective Impact. And this is a really interesting story about the power of collective purchasing. And I think it dovetails really well with the previous session in absolutely embracing the power of institutional purchasing, period, but also adds an element around collective target setting, benchmarking, and exchanging best practices for what works. It also really demonstrates just that power of partnerships. So just briefly, a little bit of background on Stanford Dining, Hospitality, and Auxiliaries. Students are the reason we are here. We know that one's college years is a really unique period of identity formation. Students are figuring out their preferences, their values, developing new rituals and habits in social contexts. They're also really, whether they realize it or not, coming to understand the role that food will play in their lives as adults. And so we take very seriously not just the 25,000 meals that we serve at Stanford every day, but the 450 million meals that these students will go on to consume throughout their collective lifetimes. It's an amazing opportunity also when you think about the domino effect and the decisions about food that they will make on behalf of others when they're parents in the future, when they're entrepreneurs and have companies that maybe have food programs, when they have other roles, as well as the collective demand signaling through their collective consumer power well after their college years. So at SDHA, we have a robust and diverse portfolio of dining operations, including teaching kitchen and food trucks, Stanford Flavor Lab, and the Institute that I'm proud to lead. We also know across all of this that sustainability means many different things to many different people. And we've chosen to really focus our efforts, our partnerships, our purchasing power, our thought leadership on 6 key pillars. So I don't have time to go into all of these today, but I wanted to just highlight climate smart dining as that first pillar, because that's really where this initiative sits. And we also know that within climate smart dining, the 2 biggest areas for opportunity, the 2 biggest opportunities for impact, are plant forward purchasing and food waste reduction and prevention. So when it comes to plant forward, we've been on the plant forward journey at Stanford for quite some time. And it's really because of the Menus of Change principles, which are all about that intersection of both human and planetary health. And so you'll see that, the proof is in the data. This is not just an aspirational kind of qualitative pillar, but it's demonstrated in our procurement dollars and our procurement pounds. And anybody who's familiar with ASHE, the Association for Advancement in Sustainability in Higher Education, the ASHE STARS framework for kind of evaluating colleges and universities is actually one of the biggest ways you earn points essentially is for the percentage of your purchases that are plant-based. The other big way is the percentage of your purchases that are third-party, ethically or environmentally responsible production practices. And so we're actually ranked 5th in the nation for that. You see here 86% vegetarian and 64% vegan of all of our menu items. I'm telling you this not to be on my high horse about how great Stanford is, but to just demonstrate that A, we walk the talk. It's also why we co-founded the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, to be a domino of positive change throughout not only campus dining, but the food service sector. And our Stanford Food Institute is really a platform for sharing how on earth are we doing this? How is this working? And what's not working too. So the vision of Dr. Shirley Everett, our Senior Associate Vice Provost for Stanford Residential and Dining Enterprises, had this vision for the Institute to help shape a better future of food for the benefit of all humanity. And we're really excited to support the academic mission of the university through the Institute, and also really be a hub for all the different food systems activities on campus. It's very decentralized. And so we're kind of the home for anyone and everyone that is interested in being part of this, in helping to shape it. So it's a platform, it's a hub, it's a community, and it's all centered around research, education, and flavor and innovation. So we work with faculty in all 7 schools, and we do something that has fired me up now for over a decade, which is we use campus dining halls as living laboratories. And it's far more exciting to us. We love to do research at Stanford and with our fantastic faculty colleagues. I think Christopher Gardner's here somewhere. But we all especially love to do multi-site behavioral research with our partners across not only the US, but internationally, as part of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. So we co-founded this with the CIA and Stanford Prevention Research Center 2014. And we're now, excuse me, I'm going the wrong direction. There we go. We now have over 70 institutions that all come together with nutritionists, culinary professionals, executive chefs, sustainability managers, dining directors, senior university administrators, and academic researchers to do that living lab research. And that's what we're probably best known for. The taste-focused language work of the Edgy Veggies Toolkit is probably what we're best known for. It really just demonstrated the power of rigorous academic research, that this was peer-reviewed, but also the important ability to translate that into operationalizable, my favorite word, strategies that you can actually implement in volume food service settings. And so this found the incredible power of a sort of elegantly simple technique of using taste-focused, indulgent, decadent language to increase both selection and consumption of vegetable-based dishes. But what we're less known for is that we also leverage our combined purchasing power. And it's the same spirit of collaboration and also of insight sharing, of knowledge sharing, of breaking down silos across this whole landscape of campus dining in order to share, again, you know, we're on many of the same journeys, on the same trajectories. We have similar goals around health and sustainability, Scope 3 emissions, and so forth. And no one is really there yet, period. So we better work together to figure out how to get there. So the story of collective impact actually started with a very nerdy article that I read in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. And it was just a couple of sentences about this concept of collective impact. And the idea was essentially coming up with common metrics, a centralized way to collect data, to analyze data, to do benchmarking, to share best practices and learning with other participants. And we had a lot of conversations between myself and Jackie Bertoldo, Dr. Jackie Bertoldo, who is Stanford Food Institute Senior Advisor, as well as Eric Montel, Assistant Vice Provost for SDHA, about how we could possibly apply that framework to the MCRC and say, could this work? Because the reality is no one had done it before. If you're familiar with the Cool Food Pledge, which is, we have our colleagues here, our research collaborators from World Resources Institute, they were an early thought partner as well, because we actually co-developed the methodology together. We were essentially sort of the testing ground to say, would this work? Would institutions send us our data? I can tell you right now that sending data and analyzing this kind of data is pretty much no one's favorite thing to do. So would they send it to us every year? Is it not, we're not aiming for perfect data one time from one school. We need extremely different types of colleges and universities to send data every year for a very long period of time, because we had set a collective target to reduce our combined food-related greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. And this was in 2017. So the goal was really to create that methodology, figure out what could work. Can we even compare apples to apples, right? Different menu management systems, different ways of internally assessing data. And so the goal was to understand not only the environmental impact, but critically also the diet quality and human health impact. Because menus of change is in our very name, right? We're not going to get kind of tunnel vision on, or carbon tunnel vision, which is often something that happens in the, it's kind of reduce emissions at all costs. And that's a key learning that I really want to emphasize. We always had a equal focus on health. But also to test and iterate, we started with a small cohort, and then to create annual reports and case studies to really highlight what's working among our member institutions. So one of the other key learnings was to try to really focus on essentially where do you get the biggest bang for your buck, right? Yes, it matters for most Scope 3, and I'm involved with Climate Action Plan at our university. It eventually matters to measure everything. But for the sake of this, to focus on what we call the protein portfolio, it was really a great way to make this a more inclusive and a more accessible initiative for many institutions to engage in, to distill to these 10 categories that capture the biggest proportion of emissions. And because we know, and also in large part menus of change, the outsized impact of protein and the outsized importance of the opportunity related to the protein shift in the grand scheme, right? So that was a key win as well. So we set this collective target. We, as I said, kind of were, still testing and iterating around the actual methodology and the engagement strategy. And a huge thank you to this year's participants. What I want to highlight is that this really is not just something, quaint liberal arts schools can do, or like the lefty West Coast schools. It spans the country, it's public-private, it's large and small. We have 2 universities in the UK. We have Google, which has, of course, campuses internationally, and they're an ex officio member. And that speaks to what I was saying about that methodology piece, that it's just in figuring out how to really make this framework and translate what could really work from an operational standpoint, but with incredible rigor behind all of it. So kind of third key learning for everyone involved in this was just this visual. Because maybe theoretically, maybe you read reports about like beef and lamb, ruminants, biggest carbon footprint. But this really tells you everything that you need to know in terms of where to focus. If your goal is to reduce food-related emissions, and that was the goal of this initiative, you see that even a very small amount of beef and lamb purchases make up the lion's share of your emissions. That also means, really excitingly, that even if you only reduce a 0.5%, right? Fairly small, that's going to have a really significant, that's going to significantly move the needle on emissions. On the reverse, what I find so exciting is you look at the green parts, beans, legumes, nuts and seeds and grains. From a volume standpoint, you can feed a lot of people really nutrient-dense foods that are really delicious and exciting, and that's showing a very small percentage of your footprint. So it pointed to that off the bat and made, when each school which participates gets their individualized report, this is a very exciting call to action. But importantly, it was this collective target. Nobody's making public commitments in this initiative. We do, as I said, partner with WRI and that Cool Food Pledge, and you can make public commitments, but each school was able to get back their own report and learn every year. So bottom line, 90 million pounds of food across 31 institutions. And drum roll, please, here's your dose of good news for the day, building on earlier. We've now reduced our combined food-related greenhouse gas emissions by 24.3%, just between 2019 and 2022. And so that's, thank you. We're not resting on our laurels, but we are very proud to have reached that 97% of the way to the 2030 target. We love social math. This has huge, meaningful impacts from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective. And this is really what's accounting for these shifts. So reduction in meat overall, especially beef and lamb, reduction in dairy, and then always importantly, Walter, I know you're here, what's replacing these foods, right? And it's this real increase in seafood, and it's sustainable seafood because these are schools that are already bought into menus of change principles. It's an increase in eggs, and we can talk about that separately if you'd like, but also real increases in beans, legumes, and grains. So where do we go from here? So we are excited, sorry, maybe that's a little hard to see. We're excited to tell the story first and foremost, and opportunities like this. We're excited to welcome more institutions. So whether you're part of the MCRC and you have not already submitted data, you're welcome to get involved, but also other institutions. If this is a reason in itself to get involved with the collaborative, we're just eager to scale this even more and to bring more institutions into the fold. We will be sharing another learnings report later this year that builds on our 2020 early learnings report, and that will give all the juicy strategies, case studies, stories, again, the how behind all of this. And then lastly, really important, is that we have actually extended the target now to be a 40% reduction by 2030, which critically aligns with the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet and is even more explicitly elevating that equal importance on the human health dimension. So Dr. Bertoldo's dissertation, University Procurement for Planetary Health Study, just came out. We'll be working on academic publications around that. And then at Stanford, one of the things I'm really excited about is actually scenario modeling. And I encourage anybody who's working on this to do something in this along these lines, where we're looking at a third lens. So emissions, nutrient density and diet quality, and animal welfare. And so we're partnering with the Stanford Humane and Sustainable Food Lab, taking 7 different scenarios. One of them is Eat Lancet. And we're now going to be able to, before we make these changes, look at the trade-offs, the co-benefits, and have the most holistic view possible. And then eventually, again, kind of integrate all this into the collective impact target. So I'd love to hear from you, love to have other institutions get involved, share learnings, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today.